Shalom, friends. Before we start learning Parshat Vaetchanan, I want to just make two notes. Firstly, that this is Shabbos Nachamu this week, Shabbat Nachamu, the Shabbat of comfort following Tisha B'Av, our national annual day of mourning, and also that just before Shabbat is Tu B'Av, the holiday of love that we celebrate, the Jewish Valentine's Day, if you will, leading up to Shabbat Nachamu. Also, this Parsha podcast today is in memory of Dottie Friedlander, a blessed memory, who was a beloved wife, mother, grandmother, great-grandmother, and sister, mother of my dear friend, Dr. Gary Friedlander. May her memory be a blessing, and may this learning help to elevate her neshama. Sefer Devarim, Parshat Vaetchanan, on the unity of God. In Parshat Vaetchanan, Moshe gives the Israelites the essential rules for how they are to live when they cross over into the Promised Land. As such, Moshe's speech contains many Jewish principles we still know well today. For example, we're told to pass on the story of Yetziat Mitzrayim, of the Exodus from Egypt, and the Aseret HaDibrot, the Ten Commandments, are restated in full. We're also given the other foundational statements of Judaism, the Shema and the V'ahavta. Moshe tells us, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. V'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavcha u'b'chol nafshecha u'b'chol me'odecha. You shall love your Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your might. The V'ahavta goes on to give the mitzvot of tefillin, and you shall bind them for a sign upon your hand, and they shall be for frontlets between your eyes, and mezuzahs, and you shall write them upon the doorposts of your house and upon your gates. And so that we can all remind ourselves in our daily lives to love the one God. So what does it really mean to have one God? In the Jewish tradition, we can identify a couple of different dimensions to Echad, God's oneness, as we said in the Shema. Most simply, there is one God and no other. We can translate the Shema as saying, the Lord is our God, the Lord alone. The Lord is one. This makes Avraham Avinu, Abraham our father, the founder of monotheism. And it makes ethical monotheism one of Judaism's main contributions to the world. On one level, monotheism is what Judaism is all about. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one, is the tweet-size summary of the religion, one might say. And monotheism demands ethics as it bounds us to an absolute truth. In a worldview with multiple gods, people can have competing truths and competing principles of morality. Having one God demands that we seek the one truth. We can have multiple viewpoints of how we get there, but monotheism obligates us to seek the one objective source of all morality. To be clear, polytheists are not necessarily immoral. Monotheism shouldn't lead us to be fundamentalists. One might think that when in the classic Midrash, Avraham smashes his father's idols, he's being a fervent fundamentalist. But actually, he's smashing the notion that our life success is measured through tchotchkes. Rather, as monotheists, we measure our success through our inner dignity, our inner godliness, by staying attuned with our purpose. The moral failing of idolatry is not understanding that the job of God is taken. Monotheism can help us humble ourselves to remember that we are not God. Additionally, it inspires the courage to experience God's image within us. Another dimension of Echad, and this is the one that can really help our understanding of God grow and mature, I would propose, is God's oneness can mean that there is nothing outside of the oneness of God. Earlier in this Parsha, Moshe teaches us, know this day and keep in mind that the Lord alone is God in heaven above and on earth below. There is no other. Hasidic leaders such as the Alter Rebbe and the Slonimer Rebbe take this to mean that there is nothing but God. Ein od milvado. Everything that exists is part of the same unity. With this in mind, we can recognize the immediacy of our duties to one another. Once we realize there is no difference between us and one another, because we are all part of the same oneness, we can better internalize how important it is to fight back against all injustice, because monotheism helps us to see all injustice as a personal attack on ourselves, because everything is interconnected in oneness and in unity. It helps us to see that we are in the image of that one God, and the theological position puts human rights at the forefront, because there's only oneness. Part of the illusion of self and other falls away, and we have an increased responsibility to one another, to care, to love, to advocate for each other in allyship. As individuals, we're complicated. We live in paradox. We ourselves have multiple dimensions and identities, but the multiplicity is housed within our oneness, that we are still a singular individual. So too, God holds multiplicity within oneness. That is why we need the unique Torah and the representation of each different person or type of person, because it brings the fullness of God's presence into the world. And so while it is obvious that there is a oneness of being, there is paradoxically and simultaneously a brokenness and division. This complication comes to the forefront in the book of Zechariah, where it says of a perfected future, "And the Lord shall be king over all the earth. In that day the Lord shall be one, and God's name shall be one." The Talmud points out this apparent contradiction, saying in Tractate Pesachim, is that to say that now God is not one already? And yet the Torah teaches us nothing more clearly. "Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one." So the tradition comes to the conclusion that now the one God exists in a divided world, one that contains good and evil. But the future world, the one we must strive to create, is one in which all creation will be unified in goodness. And then the vision of Hashem Echad, of God's unity, will be brought to fullness and realized, leading a global ethical transformation. Shabbat Shalom, and may Dottie Friedlander's memory be a blessing.